In this video, we are going to see about the Shakespearean tragedies. In the previous class, we have seen about the Shakespearean comedies. Now we are going to see the Shakespearean tragedy. During pagan and Christian times, tragedy has been regarded as the noblest poetic achievements, and among other races too, poetry has regarded tragedy as one of the noblest sentiments of the poetic spirit. For long years, practically all over the world, wherever the English language is cultivated, Shakespeare has been regarded as the greatest dramatic poet in the world, and his tragedies have been considered as his best achievements. Probably because Shakespeare has been able to exhibit his mind and art through them in the best possible manner. He has been popular to the scholars and critics and also to the lay people because of his universal appeal both in his tragedies and comedies. Because just as his tragedies reflected his deep insight into the human passions and instincts, so also on the other hand his comedies or romances reflect his own brighter mood and also the happier aspects of human life. In a tragedy, man is overcome by certain power, either human or non-human, opposed to him. Partly due to his own inherent deficiency and partly due to the mysterious potency of the non-human powers, which some call fate while others call circumstances. Whatever may be the curse of tragedy in human life, which is reflected in dramatic literature, the question arises why man is particularly interested in tragedy. We find pleasure in the tragedy of the life of a human character, particularly when we love, admire, and respect such a life and character. One of the chief characteristics of a character it ends in death of the hero and also other persons who are associated with him. This tragedy of the hero is brought about not by any artifice of the dramatist but by the behavior of the hero, particularly in relation to the environment, either human or non-human, with which he has no grapple throughout his career and which actually brings about his tragic end, although Shakespeare and some of his critics are inclined to believe that it is some inherent defect in the character of the hero that falls to adjust itself to the environments which really brings about the tragedy of his life and career in the play as it does in actual life also. Of course, regarding that the cause of death of the hero, there are different views among the critics. Some of the critics believe that it is the hero who is entirely responsible for his tragedy, while a few other critics believe that certain circumstances of life are beyond human control and hence the hero is not responsible for his tragedy. But on the other hand, it is the unfavorable circumstances which are really responsible for the tragedy. There are a few other critics who believe that what we call fate is the universe is the cause tragedy in any of the particular human life. A few other critics who cannot explain fate or the conspiracy of few other critics bring into the arena some supernatural agency and hold it responsible for bringing about the ruin of the life and character. but it is responsible for bringing about the ruin of the life and character. Okay. But Shakespeare introduced all the elements, the supernatural, the natural, and the human, in order to bring about the ruin and tragedy of the hero in his tragic, whatever might have been his personal belief in the cause of human tragedy. In Shakespearean tragedy, most of the critics have raised the questions. Why does the hero die? The Greek dramatists believed in Nemesis, the goddess of retribution or justice, who according to the ancient Greek religious faith is the instrument of punishment for all kinds of human wrongs, human injustice, human follies, human vices, and human deficiencies. That is why in the Greek drama we find how the hero meets his death because of his own faults, because of his own crimes and his sins. The Greek dramatists observed poetic justice because, like all Greeks, he too believed that wrongdoer must be punished, and also whoever is associated with him must be punished in the same or lesser degree according to the extent of his crime or sin or fault. The Greek dramatists also believed in the reverse law of justice, namely that one who performs good acts should be equally rewarded. According to Bradley and Charlton, Shakespeare also believed in the moral order of the universe or the law of justice. But then the question arises, who actually implants the evil instincts in human nature? If it is not the creator of his instincts, how can he be held responsible for his inherent evil nature? Nobody answered this question, because nobody knows whether man himself or nature is really the author of good or bad instincts in human nature. That is why probably even Shakespeare played the victim to the universal belief in the law of retribution, or in the unknown and mysterious power which we call fate. Yes, which we call fate. Some of the critics of Shakespeare trace this belief in the law of retribution or justice in Christianity, which lays stress on human reason, human power of understanding, and human judgment, and that is why these critics believe that Shakespeare's conception of tragedy was that character is destiny, or in other words, it is the hero himself who is not entirely responsible for his tragedy. But these critics have not been able to answer our questions, namely, who actually drives man to action, good or bad, and who should be held responsible for man's action. If man is not sometimes aware of what he is doing, or if he has no control over certain things which are external to him and yet which exercise a tremendous influence upon his body and mind. For example, in King Lear, it is the stupidity of the king which is really responsible for all his misery and ruin. Shakespeare probably wants to say that King Lear, instead of believing in other daughters and giving away all his property to them, should have trusted his youngest his youngest daughter, and because he commits this grave error in his own understanding and judgment of the character of his own daughter that he pays such heavy penalties. In the case of Macbeth, it is because of his vaulting ambition that he is tempted to murder his most noble king, and also to get murdered Banquo, his friend and comrade in the battlefield, and further to get massacred the innocent wife and children of Macduff, simply in order to be a king and also to make his position secure as a king. For all of us which crimes, Macbeth suffers grievously both in body and mind and ultimately dies. Similarly, Othello's own defect of nature is his undue cruelty, due to which he trusts too readily the villain Iago and distrusts his own innocent wife. It is Othello's cruelty which darkens into fatal suspicions about the chastity of his wife that brings about the tragedy in the play. But what's about Hamlet? What has he done that he should suffer all his life and die in the long run? On the other hand, Hamlet is the victim of the crime of his uncle and mother, who alone should have paid the penalty of death, but then Hamlet and innocent Olivia both end their lives in a tragic manner. Is there any poetic justice in the death of such hero or his associates? No. Shakespeare had a sense for tragedy but no philosophy of it. We find in his tragedies certain types of persons coming into conflict with certain typical circumstances. In each of these plays, we find that some moral ulcer destroying the physical as well as the spiritual fabric of life of the hero. This is what we find in the smaller tragedies, but in the greater tragedies, we find in the melody of the hero who is directed to his tragic doom by the sheer fatality of his melody. For example, Hamlet possesses a fatal speculative spirit, while Macbeth possesses fatal valuating ambition. But Othello, on the other hand, possesses an unusual cruelty which creates a fatal suspicion about his wife's modesty and conjugal fidelity. While in King Lear, we notice the universal infirmity of old age that plays the victim of his own stupidity. Shakespearean tragedy is profoundly spiritual but not in the least religious. Shakespeare takes human life as the manifestation of a great moral order, but then human life is lived in the midst of universe in which mightier forces than those of man are opening and shaping the destiny of mankind. In the eyes of Shakespeare, bodily death is tragic or pathetic only when it involves the death of the spirits, which is the real tragedy of human life or of the human soul, and which Shakespeare shows in his great tragedies. Macbeth finds life in his fits of desperation as nothing but a rale told by an idiot. Signifying nothing, King Lear also realizes the same pathetic lesson at the end of his career. The same lesson of human life is evident from the words of Othello and Hamlet, who struggle in vain against the power that disintegrate the body, annihilate the soul. For man as well as for Shakespeare, the real tragedy of life is the conviction of its futility, whether one actual suffers any body death or not. Then believe that in comedies, Shakespeare has an exuberant confidence in the spirit of man, while in tragedies he lost such confidence, faith. But in our opinion, there is no such contradiction of faith but between the comedies and the tragedies. We feel that Shakespeare made no distinction between smiles and tears, between joys and sorrows, and they are but passing phases in human life, and also because even the virtuous persons equality suffer bodily or mental agonies like the sinner and the criminals. Shakespeare probably believed in the gradual evaluation of the human spirit, which does not end with one misfortune or with one life on earth. But on the other hand, it extends up to eternity like eternal universe in order to attain perfection or absolute bliss, which is known as Hindu philosophy as Anandam. What is it? Anandam. Shakespeare never found any theory of tragedy, as was the custom which most ancient Greek Roman dramatists. He unconsciously represents the various aspects of human life through his art, and it is for the critic to analyze and deduce rules of form and matter from them. We ordinarily confuse Shakespeare, the man, with Shakespeare, the artist, because our standard of judgment is always colored by the conviction to the standard poets and playwrights. But Shakespeare stands for above all such limitations of personal reflections. He never commits his conceptions, he never betrays his convictions, even in the most apparent and clear expression of truth, and herein lies his magic of art, the secret of his universal genius. The story of most tragedies of Shakespeare centers around one person, or at most around the hero and the heroine. As in Romeo and Juliet and Antony and Cleopatra, the story inevitably leads up to it, the death of the hero, and death is not sudden or accidental in the in the triumphant environments, but every little circumstances, as it were, leads up to the inevitable end through a chain of suffering and misfortune. These misfortunes are also exceptional character, and they are mostly unexpected and transcending all standards of calamity, but not unnatural. The emotions which follow the tragic atmosphere are also equally varied, and their elements are distributed without any fixed principle of proportion in the various plays. As in King Lear, the emotion of pity is more prominent than in Macbeth or Hamlet. Shakespeare's conception of tragedy, both in personality and event, almost approaches the medieval conception, which can be believed than all tragedies are the stories of the falls of illustrious men. In almost all the tragedies of Shakespeare, such as Julius Caesar, Macbeth, King Lear, and even in the Othello and Romeo and Juliet, we can trace this element or grandeur and strange sublimity about the heroes, and also about the change which the nature of events creates at their fall. The tragedy is uniformly woven with a godly dignity even when man's utmost pride of fortune is wrecked by the inscrutable power of fate. King Lear feels himself every inch a king even when he does about a homeless than danger itself on the eve of his murder. Macbeth also, while near his doom, believes too much in that security which is moral's chiefest enemy. The calamity in Shakespeare's tragedies, however exceptional and unprecedented it may be, doesn't proceed from any unnatural event or supernatural agency, but proceed directly from the deeds of men, which are fruits of character. And that is why the critics always say that with Shakespeare's character is destiny. But Shakespeare's interest lay not only in character but also in action, to which the interest of the plot is always subordinated in such an exquisite fashion that all the three interests are interwoven into a harmony of tragic tension which deserves the highest standard of dramatic purpose. Men in Shakespeare's tragedies are themselves in the author of their proper woe, and the woe is characteristic as the deeds are characteristic, as in Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth and Richard II. The other elements which work into the tragic action are the supernatural element, chance or accident, and the abnormal conditions of mind. The witches in Macbeth, the ghosts in Julius Caesar and in Hamlet cannot be explained away without reason for their place in the action. We mark how the ghost or Caesar brings the sense of failure in Brutus, how it pinches the conscience of Richard, how it rebukes the guilty mind of Macbeth, and how it creates suspicion in Hamlet and prepares him to avenge his father's murder. The abnormal conditions of mind such as insanity, hallucination, somnambulism, although they do not fully express character, yet they are not mean instruments to enhance the tragedy and pathos of the conflict, which led to these abnormal manifestations of the mind. Chance also plays an important role in the action of tragedy, though its introduction is not too frequent or too unexpected. When the casual sequence has been firmly established, chance appears to help the final solution of the conflict. We notice this play of accident particularly in Romeo and Juliet, King Lear and Othello. Shakespeare only confirms the law of nature which appeals to human life, particularly in tragic moment. But his introduction of the element of chance, which is rightly called the mediator between man and his inscrutable destiny. Unlike all other dramatists, Shakespeare attaches more importance to the inward conflict than the outward conflict. Than the actual makes us feel the conflict of passion, ideas and principles within the soul of the hero rather than between the opposing parties of the groups of persons, but there is always harmony between the two forms of conflict. The Shakespeare's hero, like the action, the Shakespeare's heroes are also are exceptional beings, too grand and too sublime, and sometimes too ignoble and too much below pity or sympathy. Life seems unusually intensified almost to a wit heat, either of virtue or of voice. In almost all the heroes, we observe a marked one-sidedness, a predisposition in some particular direction. A fatal tendency is to identify the whole being with one interest, object, passion, or habit of mind. It is a fatal gift, but it carries with it touch of greatness, and where there is joined to it notability of mind or genius or immense force, we realize the full power and reach of the soul, and the conflict in which engages acquires the magnitude which stirs not only sympathy but pity. But Shakespeare depends not to so much upon conspiracy of circumstances as upon their inborn weakness, which led them unwares to a crisis, and hence the dimension of the tragedy is so great and the resultant emotions so intense. But Shakespeare nowhere stamps his hero with any smallness which might inspire contempt or hatred for humanity. The hero is always dignified even in his mighty fall, and hence, instead of the sense of pity, we feel a sense of wonder and surprise of magnitude of the mysterious of human nature. Bradley calls these feelings as the impression of waste, a sublime disappointment of the high ideal on the prodigies of nature. A closer to truth and dissolves all vanity, prejudice and darkness of godly dignity. What is then essence and ultimate power in the tragic world of Shakespeare, and how far does it correspond to life and nature? It is very difficult to suggest whether Shakespeare believed in fate or not. But anyhow, to contribute his personal faith to his dramatic art would be discredit to his sublime genius, and yet we cannot possibly ignore the mysterious ways, the working of the unseen hand in the rise and fall of the great heroes, who look like helpless creature born or on irresistible flood towards a counteract. We cannot explain why our thoughts are ours and their ends none of our own. If we take this as the keynote of Shakespeare's tragedy, we get only two alternatives: either that our thoughts are controllable realities, or that the realities are more powerful than our thoughts. In both the cases, the end is the same: the futility of thought or action, wherein lies the greatness of man. Perhaps in the temporary triumph of misguided energy, or in the self-deception of vanity, or in the honest failure of unknown and unseen ambitions. Can anybody explain the failure of Brutus, the reaction of Hamlet, the agony of Othello, the fate of King Lear, the critics? Shakespeare has mysteriously linked human destiny with partial freedom of the human will. He has made his heroes victims to their own deeds, and yet has succeeded in enlisting sympathy in their favor. He has married virtue with vice into a splendid chaos, which only inspires a feeling of helplessness. But this impression of fatalism in Shakespeare is not a pre-established enmity, but between man and his fate. The beginning of the tragedy nowhere feel like an arbitration of the spiteful power of the supreme, nor does it appear like the law of karma, which leads to the heredity of misfortune. and is always out of proportion to the magnitude of crime or penitence. Unlike the primitive conception of fatalism, the action is never predestined. This is sufficient scope for the development of will in the beginning, though there is hardly any apology for its ultimate frustration. This is the queer irony of Shakespeare's tragic art. This irony cannot be explained by the moral or spiritual order of the universe, as some have attempted and failed to do, nor can it be solved alone by the problem of evil, which is often suggested by cynicism. The problem of fatalism in Shakespeare is not at all a problem of destiny, but it is a deeper problem of the individual as against that of universal. Shakespeare possibly never thought of the solution except of the apparent inconsistence which started him in the face through the realities of life. Although human action is the central fact in tragedy, yet it is not the main cause of the catastrophe. There are far other things than the deeds of man that lead to the tragic crisis, and hence it is the true that catastrophe is the return of the action on the head of the agent. Whatever may be the idea of poetic justice, Shakespeare does not seem to have maintained his crude, primitive law of nemesis any of his in place, because it is purely conventional and so unnatural to life. And unnatural to life. Okay. He was writing tragedy and would not be tragedy if it were not a painful mystery. Bradley has further said, Bradley, a philosopher, has further said, we remain confronted with the inexplicable fact, or the no less inexplicable appearance of a world traveling for perfection but not bringing to birth, together with glorious good and evil which it is able to overcome only by self-torture and self-waste. And this fact or appearance is tragedy. Hence, our judgment of Shakespearean tragedy does not explain the whole truth, but only gives scattered intimations of the great tragic world which is too deep for artistic analysis. That is it. This is Shakespearean tragedies. Thank you.